It's happening again, folks. Sanji's crowning moments in Water 7 have been scrubbed from chapter format and shoved into an episode log. You're killing me, Smalls. But that won't stop me, because I do what I want. Sanji's empathy comes out full blast in this arc. When he hears about the Mary's doomed condition, his thoughts immediately turn to Usopp, who loves her dearly. He rages harder than he ever has as he stops Luffy from inflicting irreparable harm. Sanji loves all of his crew, but he's also in the unique situation where he can relate deeply to Usopp in spite of his place in the monster trio, because he's intimately aware of what it feels like to find oneself lacking. As confident and prideful as he is, Sanji is very troubled, with an extremely unsustainable way of life. Still, there's a fundamental difference between them, and it's that Sanji is not depressive by nature. Despite his abysmal self-worth, I think Sanji is a genuinely happy person, because he's grateful for what he has. He sees the glass as half full while Usopp finds it half empty. But this is also why Sanji's self-image is initially dependent on others, as he views himself in terms of his utility to his benefactors. Sanji tries to assuage Robin's concerns too by mentioning the attempt on Iceberg's life. What he says about forgiving a woman's lies seems like his usual phylogeny talking at first, but it also speaks for a deep affection that goes beyond ego. Rather than focusing on the hurt of being lied to, Sanji chooses to look at the woman past that fabrication. Of course, Mr. Prince still makes a comeback when he loses himself to a blissful daydream of romance at the sea train station. And he never does things by halves, so he finds the time to pen an entire love letter to Nami before he boards the Puffing Tom. Never change, Sanji. By the way, there's an interesting contrast between Zoro and Sanji, where Zoro stays in place to observe everyone's movements, while Sanji roams nonstop in search of Robin. It suits their roles that Zoro would stick with Luffy in the end, while Sanji goes off in pursuit of their crewmates, current and former. Sanji's fight on the sea train is one of my absolute favorites, and not just because he uses kitchen knives. For one, his iconic line about how the loveless preparation of a single ingredient ruins the dish ripples out all the way to the Whole Cake Island saga. This fight is not only clever and exciting, but emotional as well in the way he wallops Swansea into the next car for insulting a crewmate. Sanji is an incredible advocate for Usopp and Robin in the saga, because he's wholly invested in their feelings and experiences. When he learns that Robin's trauma is being used against her, he, a fellow survivor, is overcome with fury while understanding of her position. For all his love of ladies, he holds a serious grudge against Khalifa for her part in humiliating Robin, which brings us to his conundrum at Ina's lobby when he finds himself unable to hit her. Oda-sensei has stated that Sanji is actually incapable of hurting a woman. Zev's teachings are so deeply imprinted in Sanji, mind, body, and soul, that he literally cannot do it. His explanation to Nami for his failure is just that, an explanation. He's not trying to excuse himself because he falls into his habit of over-apologizing to the point Nami tells him to stop. While Sanji wants to help Robin from the bottom of his heart, that same heart cannot betray Zev. It's not that he prioritizes one over the other, but that his inability to rank love leaves him as a loveless intermediary who takes all the hits, even if it might result in his death. Stuck between a rock and a hard place, he's on a downward spiral by the time he crashes into Nami and Chopper's location. Nami recognizes how difficult this has been for him, and that's why she comforts him by putting forth the good she sees in his discipline. Instead of admonishing him for it, she covers his weakness, which is exactly what he needs. Let's go to Sanji and Zev for a moment. Zev drilled several lessons into Sanji, who's taken each and every one to heart. Most characters, including Sanji himself, view some of them as restrictive. Sanji cannot fight with his hands or hurt a woman. While he compensates for the former with his footwork, the latter halves his combat prowess. It's a handicap on the best of days, if a chivalrous one in its consideration. It's not that Sanji views women as weaker. In fact, when he tells women that they don't need to fight because he will protect them, he isn't knocking on their abilities. He's just saying that they don't have to fight if they don't want to. He never actually stops a woman from going into battle. He only ever defends. His beliefs regarding women have nothing to do with his refusal to do battle against them and everything to do with his relationship with Zev. Sanji does not want to become someone Zev hates. His steadfast adherence to Zev's principles is not done out of fear, however, but out of the utmost love. When Sanji was a boy, Judge asked the impossible of him, and this severely damaged his nascent sense of self. Nothing he did was good enough. Then Zev came along, prescribing these achievable goals, and going as far as to call himself a parent, and in doing so he helped Sanji to build confidence in himself. Zev is the reason Sanji can stand tall, and he will rather die than spit on his father's values. So Sanji knows exactly where he falls short relative to the rest of the world. It's a point of shame for him, insofar that he counts this value as a strike against himself in Wano, when he asks himself if the current version of him would be as useful to Luffy as an emotionless warrior of science. Sanji doesn't strike Black Maria, and it makes complete sense for his narrative not to do that. The Straw Hats with issues concerning self-image reclaim their unwanted labels during the raid on Onigashima. Chopper embraces his monsterhood, while Robin becomes a full-fledged demon. It's a little more understated for Sanji, but he takes back what it means to be a failure by choosing to remain as himself, the cook of the Straw Hats. Because the failure is whom Luffy went back for on Whole Cake Island, and it's the failure whose heart beats with humanity. That humanity is flawed, but it's the one Luffy loves. And that love propels Sanji to live instead of forsaking his heart to science. For Sanji to retract his previously established values would defeat the purpose of this growth, because he is learning what it means to be loved for his strengths and weaknesses, as a person, not a tool for someone else. These scenes don't seek to justify Sanji's actions, but to present the realistic portrait of a man whose best and worst are two sides of the same coin, as is often the case for people. Sanji is frequently criticized for his inflexibility, but these unflinching values are his saving grace when his identity is nearly dismantled by the stress of his shifting genetic makeup. That humanity is what makes his advice to Usopp so heartfelt. Sanji spends most of the Water 7 saga highly attuned to Usopp's feelings. Between the Aqua Laguna and his attack on the Puffing Tom, he helps Usopp indirectly in consideration of the latter's pride. He plays by Usopp's rules, letting him play pretend as Sniper King until he goes for the heart by telling him that he will do what Usopp cannot do, while Usopp should do what he cannot do. It's exactly what Usopp needs to hear, because this is something achievable and tailored to his talents. This is how Sanji found confidence as a boy. Heck, it's how Nami eased to self-flagellation probably not even an hour ago. Usopp doesn't have to be a mysterious stranger from an island of snipers to make a difference. He can be himself and still succeed because he has friends standing beside him. What's interesting is that Usopp's disguise reveals one aspect of what Luffy believes a hero is. According to him, heroes wear capes. They also share their food and, if we throw Zoro into the mix, their booze. In chapter 403, Sanji is referred to as Mr. Chivalry. He wears a cape and Wano as Soba Mask, the antithesis of the evil Stealth Black, and happily feeds everyone. By these definitions, Sanji is a hero. It sounds ironic, given that he's a pirate, but is appropriate when considering his position as Zoro's foil in the crew. In regard to his fight with Jabra, Sanji demonstrates the strength of his heart by powering up through his passion. This is how he rectifies his blunder with Khalifa, so it's fitting that he ends the battle with a statement that involves heaven and hell. I feel like Sanji is a pretty good example of the I can be your Engel or your devil meme, because he's always bouncing from one extreme to the other on a given scale. At the same time, it means that he's a character with the capacity to tap into two wholly different realms, and that's exactly how he shines in the saga, with his heart and his mind. Lastly, I want to go back to Usopp's duel with Luffy. This becomes relevant down the line because Luffy meets Sanji in a one-sided duel 2 years later at Whole Cake Island. It serves as a parallel to what transpired at Water 7, and shows us how much Luffy has grown as a captain because, in my opinion, he handles the case of Sanji perfectly. The key difference between Usopp and Sanji's duels is heart. Usopp's heart was in his fight to win the Mary, whereas Sanji is in direct conflict with his own when he assaults Luffy over and over again. Luffy understands this because he knows how uncharacteristic it is of Sanji to look down on a dream, so he's aware that the duel is not truly out of Sanji's will. Sanji overlooked the sting of Robin's lies to help her in Water 7, and Luffy pretty much does the same here. Speaking of Robin, her missing piece at Ina's lobby was her fear that the crew would discard her. She doubted them despite Usopp's counsel, but Sanji has always had full faith in Luffy. His surprise at Luffy's appearance on Whole Cake Island is not because he didn't think rescue would come, but because he had left a note explaining his intentions of handling everything on his own. Sanji's original plan was to go back to the Straw Hats, and he has enough history of going solo for Luffy to grant him permission when he asks. Staying was forced onto him. And now we come full circle to Nami, who asked for help at the height of her despair. At his, Sanji still abstains from doing the same, and therein lies the heart of the issue. Sanji hates himself. It's not an act of hatred like Usopp's can be, but relative in that he loves everyone so much there's nothing left for himself. The resident failure. Zoro and later Nami make cases for why they should just let Sanji go, and he actually agrees with them. No matter his reasons, he shouldn't be excused for disrespecting Luffy, who's got a million other things on his plate with Kaido. If Sanji wants to leave the island and go to Wano, he needs to get the bracelets taken off, which means fighting the entirety of the Big Mom pirates. If he doesn't, his hands will get blown off, he won't be able to cook, and the last thing he wants is to become a burden to his crew. It's important to recognize that Sanji's hands are not just the channels for his passion and love, but also how he justifies his presence by gauging his value solely based off of how useful he is to his so-called saviors. Fighting an emperor and her crew for one intrinsically flawed cook is too much trouble, to say nothing of the hostage situation with the Baratier and later his biological family. Sanji summarizes it best when he tells Pudding that he just wants to vanish without hurting anyone. His problem is not lack of faith in Luffy, but the lack of in himself. Due to his childhood trauma, Sanji is deadly afraid of being selfish. Given the option, he will always choose to be the sacrifice and spare everyone else the trouble. That's why he strikes a deal with Big Mom to let his crewmates go, instead of dragging everyone into his battles. Even when he knows with absolute certainty that he's going to die the next day, he chooses to shoulder the burden alone. His hands may be fine, but Zeph and his biological family are in danger, and the fact still stands that he spurned Luffy. But here's the caveat with which Luffy runs him island more. Back on Water 7, Zoro also told him, "If you waver now, who are we supposed to trust?" Luffy is the captain of the Straw Hats. That means it's his role to be the pillar of support for his crew. By staying stalwart for Sanji, Luffy embodies the captain Zoro wanted him to be then. For Robin, it was about what she wanted, which was the allowance to live. Wanting to live comes later for Sanji. For now, it's about the acceptance of his existence as a failure, because he to the bitter end doesn't look for help. It is given to him by Luffy, who loves him as he is. The reason his request to Robin at Wano is such a bombshell is because that's the first time he asks. Here, the assistance is offered with neither condition nor justification, and even that proves so overwhelming that he nearly cries from having his wishes settled out by Luffy. Sanji has struggled all his life to look at his reflection and find value in it outside of the labels he wears like proud badges, but Luffy has always prized him for his heart. The cook who fed a starving man with a smile is a person he has wanted on his crew since the very beginning, and the realization of that deep acceptance is what saves Sanji, and in turn what makes Luffy a captain of the highest caliber.